Waraqah say to Muhammad that the angel that spoke to Moses was the one that spoke to Muhammad?
I don't know very much. From my understanding, it's because he had some education in Christian and their sort of text as well.
Right, hold on 1 second.
So, yeah.
If Waraqah had education about Christianity, he would know that Christians don't say that an angel like Gabriel spoke to Muhammad. Christians say that God spoke to Moses. Now, the point is, your Quran also says the same. God spoke to Moses from the burning bush, not an angel. So neither the Quran nor the Old Testament teach that an angel spoke to Moses. But yet, Waraqah is saying that the angel Gabriel was the angel that spoke to Moses. So that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I agree, doesn't?
Yeah.
Thank you. There you go. Run away.
No, it's like, I don't have very much education, so I don't understand.
Neither did Waraqah.
Yeah, I don't know very much. If I had more education, inshallah.
Are you a convert to Islam?
No.
You're born a Muslim? Right. Feel free to support one another. This is an open conversation.
Yeah.
I put it to you.
Sorry, could you repeat the original question? I can't
So the original question is this. So in the hadith, Muhammad has the experience in the cave, right? He goes to his wife Khadija, and then Khadija takes him to Waraqah, and the Waraqah says, surely this is the angel that spoke to Moses is now speaking to you.
Yeah.
My question is, why does Waraqah say that? And here's the reason why. Nothing in the Quran that comes later suggests that it's the angel Gabriel that spoke to Moses. Nothing in the Old Testament says that it's the angel Gabriel that spoke to Moses. So where is Waraqah getting his information from?
Yeah. You're a much more educated man than I am. So I feel I should probably not. I don't want to represent myself or Islam in a bad light.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Right. But let me explain to you why this is a problem.
Yeah.
It's a problem for two reasons.
Yeah.
The first reason is that it is because of Waraqah that Muhammad believes that the angel that is speaking to him is from God, rather than, as he first suspected, a demon. Because his first suspicion was this was a jinn, a shaitan, of the species of shaitan. But his instinct was overridden on the testimony of Waraqah.
Yeah.
So that's your first problem,
Yeah.
right? Because Muhammad was convinced on the testimony of Waraqah. And Waraqah was wrong, evidentially, on what he said, both by what the Gabriel told Muhammad and what the Old Testament says. The second problem is this.
According to many historians, such as Tor Andre and William Montgomery Watt, Waraqah ibn Nawfal likely adhered to, or at least sympathized with, a form of Christianity known as Ebionism. The Ebionites emerged in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, descending from Jewish communities who believed in Jesus, but rejected any claim to his divinity. For them, Jesus was not the incarnate Son of God, but a human prophet, anointed by the Holy Spirit just as earlier prophets had been. Consequently, they strongly rejected the teachings of Paul and held firmly to the law of Moses. In their faith, divine revelation was eternal and unchanging, always transmitted through angels who delivered God's law, not through the incarnate Word becoming flesh. Within this worldview, the angel of revelation was identified with the same figure who gave the Torah to Moses. Jewish rabbinic and apocryphal writings, such as the Book of Enoch and Jubilees, often name this angel as Gabriel or Metatron, the angel of the divine presence who communicates God's law. Michael, in contrast, was seen not as a messenger of revelation, but as the guardian of Israel and commander of the heavenly armies. The idea of an angelic manifestation of the divine word belongs instead to Johannine and Greek Orthodox theology, which teaches that the Logos, the Word, became flesh in the person of Christ. This is precisely the doctrine that the Ebionites rejected. They did not understand revelation as the self-disclosure of the divine word, but as the transmission of divine law through an angelic intermediary. Thus, when Waraqah declared that the being who appeared to Muhammad was the Namus, the law-bearer, who came to Moses, he was speaking entirely within the theological framework of the Ebionites. He did not interpret the event as a manifestation of the divine word or a revelation of salvation, but as a continuation of legal revelation, a reaffirmation of monotheism and obedience, not of redemption. In his mind, that messenger could only have been Gabriel, the angel of law and prophecy in Jewish tradition. Historically, this moment is crucial. The identification of that being as Gabriel did not originate from Muhammad's own experience, but from Waraqah's theological interpretation. According to the early sources, Muhammad descended from the Cave of Hira terrified, unsure who or what had spoken to him, and even fearing that he had been possessed by a jinn. Only after Waraqah reinterpreted the encounter in the language of Mosaic revelation did the experience become framed as a prophetic calling. In other words, the concept of Gabriel as the angel of revelation in Islam was not born from direct divine communication, but from the interpretation of a man shaped by a sect that had rejected Christ.
And a much deeper problem is that this hadith this argument demonstrates that the hadith is actually being made up. It's being made up 100 years after Muhammad. It's being made up to speak to a Christian audience, to try and couch Muhammad as a continuity of previous prophets. In other words, it's propaganda.
Can I just ask?
Yeah,
I don't mean to do a debate. I'm purely asking.
Sure, that's fine. That's fine.
I'm going to look into this because
Okay,
I've never heard
fair,
of it.
fair. I'll take you at your word.
So why does that show it being fabricated? Because at the very least, if what you're saying is true, then Waraqah would be wrong. Or if it is fabricated, he might not have said that.
Right. So one of the reasons that indicate that this hadith is fabricated is because, remember, Muhammad is an ignorant man. He's an unlettered man, right? He hasn't read the previous scriptures. He can't read according to the Islamic narrative, the standard Islamic narrative. Now, for Waraqah to say, oh, this was the angel that spoke to Moses, that assumes that Muhammad knows about the angel that spoke to Moses. But one of the defenses that Muslims always employ about why Muhammad is not copying from Jews and Christians is because he was an unlettered prophet. So it makes no sense for Waraqah to talk to Muhammad as if Muhammad knew. Now that means that the hadith is not being produced on a true telling of a historical event, because it assumes that everybody knows the story. In other words, it is actually written. It is actually written for a Jewish Christian audience, because they know the story of Moses. But the people that write it, they don't understand that if you actually read Exodus 3, it's God that speaks to Moses. And in the Quran, it's God that speaks to Moses. So Waraqah has no basis for saying that the angel, has no basis for saying that the angel Gabriel spoke to Muhammad. So if the hadith is true, Islam is false. If the hadith is false, then Sahih Bukhari is false, which means Islam is also false.
I have a bit of a disability with understanding what you're saying. So is this, actually, can I get your channel name or something like that?
Yes, of course.
Oh, thank you very much. Because then I can watch it back and I can understand it, what you're saying.
I'll go through it step by step.
I'm in a rush. But,
are you needing to go?
Yes, I am.
Okay, well, because you were very fair-minded and reasonable and very sincere, I want to give you a gift.
In the Quranic story of Moses, we find a fascinating theological paradox when compared to the worldview of Waraqah ibn Nawfal and the Ebionite theology he likely embraced. Waraqah, a pre-Islamic Nasrani Arab, believed that God was far too transcendent to reveal himself directly, and that divine revelation could only come through an angelic intermediary, the messenger of divine law. So when he interpreted Muhammad's experience in the Cave of Hira as the Namus, the lawbearer who came to Moses, he was speaking from a framework of angelic mediation, not divine manifestation. And yet the Quran itself tells a story that completely turns that idea on its head. In Surah Al-Qasas 28:30 and Taha 20:11-14, the voice that calls out to Moses comes from within the tree and declares, "Indeed, I am Allah, the Lord of all worlds." No angel is mentioned, no intermediary is present. It is Allah himself speaking from within the burning bush. In other words, the Quran portrays a theophany, a divine manifestation within creation, something that stands in direct contradiction to Islamic theology, which rejects any notion of God appearing in the material world. Here lies the irony. Islam denies that God can enter creation, yet in the Quran's own account, he speaks from within a tree, using a human voice. This is not an idea born from the legalistic Ebionite theology that Waraqah held, but rather a remnant of ancient Hebrew tradition, one that is deeply incarnational in tone and forms the very root of Johannine Christology, where the Word becomes flesh. Paradoxically, in the Quran, Moses is portrayed as a prophet who receives revelation directly from the presence of God, while Muhammad, regarded as the seal of the prophets, receives his revelation only through an angel, whose identity he did not even recognize until Waraqah explained it to him. The contrast is striking. Moses hears, "I am Allah," from the burning bush. Muhammad hears a command from a being he mistakes for a jinn. Moses knows exactly who is speaking to him. Muhammad must rely on a human interpreter, a man from a heretical sect, to identify his experience as divine. In terms of revelatory hierarchy, Moses' position in the Quran is therefore higher, for he speaks directly with God without mediation. Muhammad's revelation, by contrast, depends entirely on the theological interpretation of someone who denied the divinity of Christ and viewed revelation merely as the transmission of law through angels. Historically, this reveals that Islamic revelation emerged as a synthesis between two opposing worlds. On one hand, it inherited the Ebionite model of legalistic revelation, law delivered by an angelic messenger. On the other hand, the Quranic story of Moses preserves an element of theophany, implicitly echoing the very theology Islam claims to reject, a God who appears and speaks from within creation. Thus, Waraqah's declaration, "This is the Namus who came to Moses," becomes the key to understanding this synthesis. It stands as the bridge between an angelic revelation and a narrative that paradoxically depicts the manifestation of God within the natural world.